which was gaining an increasing influence on the decisions of the authorities. He thought about legal reforms, including the abolition of the inhumane imprisonment. And as I mentioned a while ago, his own father suffered imprisonment, because of which his legal reforms that he took up in his works and thought about against the inhumane imprisonment and the restriction of capital punishment came to surface in his works. He thought about and exposed the ills of the industrial society. And what were those ills? The ills of class division, discrimination, poverty, privilege, and meritocracy. His works were beautiful works of the time, and his characters, like David Copperfield, Oliver Twist, they sort of depicted the contemporary social picture. They also highlighted the vices of the Victorian age for people to understand. And the important takeaway here for all of us is, in understanding the fact that Dickens enjoyed life to the hilt, he loved life. He had a beautiful, accentuated sense of humor, but he despised and hated the social system of the time. He championed the vulnerable, but at the same time was satirical about the powerful, the hypocritical, all without making his books feel like glorified lectures. May I have the next slide, please, to highlight the point? And as I mentioned, his books didn't have glorified lectures in them. So it was not about characters sermonizing or lecturing, which can get very mundane. His writing style instead was poetic. It was gentle, but was laced with humor, and it had a powerful comic touch to it. The interesting part, ladies and gentlemen, is that his characters like Tiny Tim, Oliver Twist, Pip, David Copperfield, all seemed real. And they are relatable for every reader, even today, for all our students today. In Pickwick Papers, he created a utopian and nostalgic vision of the pre-Victorian and pre-industrial England prior to urbanization and industrialization. In A Tale of Two Cities, of course, he talks about London and Paris during the French Revolution. But if we talk about his works like Oliver Twist or Nicholas Nickleby, both of these showed his moral concern for the social well-being of the nation. And that was a huge responsibility that he took upon himself through his writings. Being able to highlight the poor law system, the evils of the criminal world in London in those days, and most importantly, victimization of children, victimization of women in Victorian society. These two concerns bothered him no end, and that's why they feature in almost all his works. In Oliver Twist, he talks about the Victorian orphans. It's a pathetic picture, something that brings tears to your eyes, should you put your heart into your reading there. The orphans were underfed, and for a meal are given a single scoop of gruel, and when Oliver asks for more, he's severely punished. Victorian child abuse, a social document about early Victorian slum life. Oliver Twist, one of his very popular works. Next slide, please. Now let's get into some of his top books. Now this is a very relative thing, and some of you should be questioning me as to why have you highlighted just these works. But it's for each of us to understand what is it that you'd rate or sort of value by way of his works. And to my mind, these are some of his absolutely priceless pieces of writing. Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend, David Copperfield, Bleak House, Little Dorrit, Oliver Twist, Nicholas Nickleby, Dombey and Son, and of course, Pickwick Papers. Now, I'm sure many of you have read many of these, or maybe all of these, and much more. But what is the important thing here is for us to understand, what do these works entail? What do they tell us about Charles Dickens in particular? And what is it that is highlighted by way of the features and characteristics, the good, bad, and the ugly of the Victorian era? And I'd like to take you through in my own little two-piece way that I can to bring forth for all of us present here this afternoon under the canopy of the 9th Odyssey International, whatever we can by way of a tribute to Charles Dickens. Let's talk about Great Expectations. What was it? Essentially, a thinking story which puts you into a reflective mood and mode. So here you have moral education of a boy who has been persecuted, who's been deceived and cheated, but whose essential goodness of heart eventually rescues him from snobbery and delusion. If you ask me, ladies and gentlemen, this is almost a perfect novel. The character of Pip and his interaction with the figures of the convict Magwitch and the half-mad Miss Havisham and the beautiful cold Estella are so very interesting. His most finely crafted book and his most moving piece of work, I would give it to Great Expectations. Truly a masterpiece. Next, let's move to Our Mutual Friend. Now, talking about Our Mutual Friend, I would rate it as his final complete novel. And why do I say that? Because it is full of emotional generosity, violent drama, rich humor, not to forget the imperfect heroine, Bella Wilfer, and Dickens' own painful episodes, which are disguised in this piece of work. Now, here comes a very important fact about Charles Dickens. In some of his works, his own subtle revelations of his own trauma and the atrocities that he suffered are disguised through the characters, portrayed through the characters in his work. And Our Mutual Friend is one such work. His very popular David Copperfield is next that comes to my mind. And if you see David Copperfield, the name itself, David, so D for David, Copperfield, C for Copperfield. You know, it's not as if it's accidental that the first letter of the name of this character is juxtaposed to his own name. So Charles Dickens, C for Charles and D for Dickens, and there you go, David Copperfield. Yeah? So it's not accidental. The hero's initials reverse Dickens' own, because a lot of Dickens' own sufferings come to surface in this particular novel. The first-person narrative characters, from the wicked Murdstones and conniving Uriah Heep to the warm-hearted Micawbers, from Aunt Betsy Trotwood, little Emily, stout-hearted Peggotty, and the silly, lovable Dora, whom David marries. they are indelibly printed on our literary consciousness. Something which is a must read for every child, I should think. So for all the students present here on this platform, do read David Copperfield to understand Charles Dickens better. Next, we have Bleak House. Bleak House is another very interesting work. And it has a very complicated plot, if you will. Immense cast of characters swirling around the case of jaundice and jaundice that has been grinding away in the court of chancery for decades. And jaundice is a phrase which we use for all the cases that are pending in the courts, even to date. So it's something that you go back to by way of referring to the terminology, or rather the jargon, if you will, in Dickens' novel Bleak House, for all the cases that are lying pending in court and go on for decades and decades. Bleak House, for many, is one of the most interesting and greatest novels by Charles Dickens. Why? Because it is an assault on the legal system at that point in time. It's a satire on foolish, and I would like to highlight that, foolish philanthropy, a gripping melodrama, and an interesting use of point of view, which is so important, perspectives, point of view, opinions, a perpetual fascination. So Bleak House is something which is a must read again. Inequalities which were prevalent in the time in the Victorian era, discrepancies, distinctions of the haves and the have-nots. And it carries a warning against the excess of laissez-faire in society. Now, what is laissez-faire? Where everything is left to everybody for it to carry on the way it is. And that turns out to be, anarchical, chaotic in nature. So this novel, Bleak House, highlights the impediments, the lacunae in the legal system that were prevalent in the Victorian era. Now let's come to the next work, Little Dorrit. So here you have Amy Dorrit, who is the youngest child of a family, born and raised in Marshalsea Prison for debtors in London. And can you imagine being raised in prison? What kind of childhood that must have entailed? And this, therefore, brings to light this huge oddity in the Victorian era at that point in time, where people were imprisoned for lack of paying back their debts, and the children, the family, the kind of atrocities that they had to suffer at the hands of law in England, in London. So Little Dorrit, Dickens' most personal autumnal quality, because it had an aging hero and quiet, staunch heroine. Its characters here in this book, very mature, very balanced. And as usual, the work is laced with comedy, resonating for its readers. A must read. Now comes Oliver Twist. And I'm sure everybody is very well versed with that. It is concerned with the social and moral evils of the time, the workhouse and the criminal world, larger than life villainies and its endless excitements. The perfect book by Charles Dickens to begin with. Nobody can forget the wicked Fagin who co-opts homeless boys into a life of crime, the murderous Bill Sykes, and the brave projection of an oppressed child as an occasion for pathos and social criticism. Now, Interestingly, Oliver Twist was very easy to adopt on stage, and till date it is being done. So there are many stage versions of Oliver Twist which one gets to see. 20 London theaters were simultaneously producing. So even non-readers, became acquainted with the simplified version of Oliver Twist. And that's a very interesting feature, ladies and gentlemen. So everybody understood Oliver Twist, irrespective of the fact whether or not they had read Oliver Twist per se. Now, coming to the next work by Charles Dickens after Oliver Twist, we have Nicholas Nickleby. And this was the most high-spirited of all Dickens novels. Yet, it was grim, a devastating attack on the Yorkshire schools, to which unwanted children were dispatched. And I'd like to repeat that for the benefit of the audience. Devastating attack on the Yorkshire schools, to which unwanted children were dispatched. I wish to understand, what do you want to make out of this phrase, unwanted children? How can children be unwanted? It's criminal to even think of it, let alone have an action in place for them. The adventures of Nicholas with the Crummies traveling theatrical troupe provide a wonderful contrast to the tragedy of the boy Smike, the saddest victim of the Squares family, who run the unspeakable school called Dotheboys Hall. And here, Dickens describes the above practices in Yorkshire boarding school, a school which was meant to house the children who were sent to the school by way of a punitive exercise. Sad and tragic. Now let's talk about Dombey and Son. Well, Dombey and Son is a powerful tragedy of a distant old businessman who comes to realize too late the value of his worthy daughter, Florence. After the death of his beloved son, Paul, and you have Dickens' most famous death scene, which features here in this work. And you must be wondering, for every work of his, I've been saying a must read. But don't forget the title I gave to the slide that you just saw, My Favorite Books, and therefore you must read and indulge. So that was Dombey and Son for you. And now we come to Pickwick Papers. Now, Pickwick Papers was it has the benign, naive Pickwick Henry and his Cockney. You all know the Cockney language, the I by sigh in England in those days. The valet spoke that language, his valet, and his name was Sam Weller, and he was full of hilarious episodes. The beauty about Dickens' humor is it's the purest form of British humor, where humor, the element of humor, is not superimposed and enforced. It's subtle, and yet it brings a smile to your face. And perhaps, if you decide to go overboard and indulge, probably go ha-ha reading about those characters. So that's the beauty of Dickens' humor. It contained many traditional jokes. We're talking about Pickwick Papers here, ladies and gentlemen. And interestingly, Dickens was rapidly developing his craft as a novelist. So this is not as if this was the finished product of a veteran. No, he was just about beginning to write and, giving vent to whatever he wanted to talk and express and sort of mention in his books about, to create a public opinion, for it to sort of spread like wildfire for people to understand as a novelist. while he was writing and publishing it. And what is remarkable is that a first novel written in such circumstances not only established him overnight, but created a new tradition of popular literature and also revived, despite its crudities, as one of the best known novels in the world. So that was Charles Dickens for you, ladies and gentlemen, and I would like to salute him today by way of, my own little mortals, a lesser mortals tribute to him in course of this beautiful exercise of talking about Charles Dickens, the Victorian era per se, and his priceless works. That brings me to the end of what I have to say. But there is a lot that we need to talk about, even beyond. And as the convener of this beautiful event and a very good friend of mine, the principal of this beautiful campus, City Montessori School, Rajajipuram Campus 1, mentioned, Mrs. Nisha Pandey, that we'll be very soon moving out into the breakout rooms with me posing two questions for you, which are not really questions, but allow me to say this. They are propellers for you to sort of think about Charles Dickens and to sort of have beautiful conversations around him and his works. And I'd like the next slide to come up on our screens for this. The first question says, what has been the most fascinating element in Dickens' writings? So I'm sure you've read his novels, and we've sort of discussed, or barely touched upon 9 of his works in the last few minutes. So what is it that you feel has been the most fascinating element, and getting into why you feel that is the most fascinating element? What is it that has sort of captivated your interest or brought you or drawn you towards Dickens' writings? And the second one, of course, is a question which I thought I was rather tempted to bring onto your screens, because this will probably evoke the best responses that I can probably think of. If Charles Dickens were to write today, I wish he was there, what do you think he would pick on? What do you think he would have picked on, and why? Now, this is not going to be an assessing exercise, believe you me. This is something to dwell on, to mull on, to discuss, to talk about. And just to sort of round up something for you before you actually move out into your breakout rooms, Akanksha, am I allowed to do that? Just to tell you that there were the good and the ugly, which were prevalent in the society in the Victorian era. And what is it that Charles Dickens chose to write about in his works? Why? And why do his works fascinate us till date? So you remember we talked about how, I find it even criminal to be talking about it. Unwanted children were sent to Yorkshire schools. How orphans were refused to be given the second helping of the gruel and were severely punished instead. How the legal system at the time created so many discrepancies and discriminations between the haves and the have-nots. And the punitive measures that were taken by way of imprisonment of debtors was something that needed to be addressed. We mentioned about the jaundice in the Bleak House, the cases that went on for decades in the court, and a couple of others which you can bring to the fore to talk about. So those are the kind of conversations we want you to have in your breakout rooms. And we'd like it very much if from amongst you, you sort of zeroed in on a representative from each of the 3 breakout rooms that we're going to move into from here on, to be talking about this and then sharing on the common platform when we come back to the common platform. Not to forget about today's times, and what do you think if we were blessed enough to have Dickens around? What do you think he would have picked on to be writing about in his works today? Good thought, I thought, for all of us to get into mulling and discussing and weaving our own stories around it. And then getting to share on the common platform after we've had our fruitful discussions in each of the breakout rooms. So that's all from me here right now. I wish this could go on and on though, but we'll move into the breakout rooms from here on, and I'm looking forward. I'll be taking a peek without judging you, believe you me, participants. Just getting to enjoy, getting the flavor of your discussions and celebrating each of those in my head and heart. So over to Akanksha for the proceedings from here. Looking forward to wonderful discussions in each of the breakout rooms. Take it from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable insights, the details which we all needed to hear on Charles Dickens and his profound works, which truly reflects in our society in today's time. Now I would request the team participating for further discussion to kindly join their breakout rooms, which would be facilitated by Ms. Uzma, Ms. Sarah, and Ms. Rashmi. Also, some of the participants would be staying back for the further discussion to take place in the main session. Now I would request our technical team to kindly move the participants in the breakout rooms. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible to everyone out here? Yeah. Okay, so some modalities for all of you, teachers out here and all the participants, that is, you'll be getting 3 minutes to speak and your topics will be reflected, that it will be shared by me on your screens. You'll have some time to speak. Also with that, if you would like to present your views, you are most welcome for your presentation. With that saying, I would now, just give me a moment, I'll present my questions. Okay, so I hope you all are able to see first question. Yes, I'll just read out the question for all of you. What has been the most fascinating elements in Dickens writing? And I would request everyone to kindly participate. The session will only be insightful for all of us if we all participate. I request the teams participating, to kindly come forward with your views. Yes, ma'am, please. Chushmita ma'am.
Uh, Yes, ma'am. I would like to say that the plot twists, the mysteries he has in his novels and his stories, and the way he gives the anticipation with fascination, and he personifies his characters in a way that they are very lively and they reflect the social positions, and moreover, the time which was he in, the characters reflected those traits, and the characters very well told the story of that era, of that period, where the people was going through suffering. So that I feel is something fascinating, and the humor he has in his writings, and the pathos he creates in his writings, and he touches the heart, and you could feel reading him, that what he is trying to deliver to us, what he's trying to say. So that is something which I feel is fascinating and is connectable. We get connected, we stay connected, and we like more reading him.
Thank you so much, Sushmita ma'am, for your valuable inputs. Now I would like Ghazal ma'am to please speak.
Is my voice audible?
Yes, Ghazal ma'am, you're audible.
Hello, ma'am. Good morning. Sorry, it's good afternoon, and good afternoon, everyone. I believe Charles Dickens was a very talented storyteller, and his writing style was very much detailed. He used a very much exaggeration also in description to portray and imply his character traits basically. Then he was a great metaphor, and he uses frequently repeated words in sentences to emphasize phrase. That's all I wanted to say.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you so much.
Akansha ma'am, I've got a question. Are we not in the breakout rooms? Because we were supposed to go into the breakout room.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, some of the participants are there in the breakout and some
Okay.
are in the main session. This is
Alright.
as well a breakout room. You can assume that. And the
Okay.
same thing goes. Yes, anyone else would like to now speak? Okay, teams, you know your active participation is highly required. It is appreciated if you do so. The questions you are all familiar with. Anyone would like to say anything?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to.
Yes, Lavi ma'am, please.
Thank you. I would like to begin with one of Dickens' famous quotes: "Have a heart that never hardens, and a temper that never tires, and a touch that never hurts." When it comes to Victorian literature, no one was as prolific and influential as Charles Dickens, to the extent that we still use the word Dickensian to describe things reminiscent of his works. If you ever had read Charles Dickens' Great Expectations or A Tale of Two Cities, you probably have a pretty good idea of what unique style Dickens entails, which is vivid characters, intricate plots, shocking twists, often to do with the hidden identity, and a healthy dose of social commentary and satire. Um, I could give examples of various writings, as Vera ma'am has already told us about uh, his various works. Pickwick Streets, where a smart valet to the wild tales of ubiquitous charlatan. The stories within these stories demonstrate Dickens' ability to juggle countless plots while still holding fast to readers' attentions. In The Tale of Oliver, a helpless orphan taken in by pickpocketers to criticize social conditions in England at that time, namely how poverty forced children, especially parentless children, into horrific circumstances. So his unique style of picturing the life of British people, their homes, the social school system, their workplace, describing the lower and the middle class subject, makes him different from others.
Okay, lovely, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Now I would request the other participants to please kindly participate and do give their inputs. Shushmita ma'am, would you like to say something? Your hand is still raised.
Actually, I forgot to lower it down. I'll present my screen.
Okay. So should we go on to next question now? So our next question is, if Charles Dickens were to write today, what do you think he would have picked up on?
Ma'am,
Yes. Yes, Shushmita ma'am.
ma'am, I feel that he would have picked up hypocrisy of the people, because Charles Dickens was a realist writer. He talked about the society. He was very empathetic, and he talked about everyone. He looked into the matters, and he looked at the condition. But in today's world, people are more hypocrites, and we have something else to say, but we don't follow that. Maybe there's different, in teaching and preaching. So if Charles Dickens were to write today, I feel that he would pick up hypocrisy of the people, and he would write more on it, and he would have requested his audience to be more realist, and then just follow the thoughts and just talk about the thoughts. But he would have asked us to be more realist and look into the things and not be ignorant.
Thank you so much, Shushmita ma'am. Thank you for your answer. Yes, anyone else would like to?
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Please.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible. Please say.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, this is the age, there's a quote, God seen in heaven and everything is all right with this world. And this is the same age where Nietzsche says God is dead. So you have these two polar extremities in which the Victorian society is situated. Now bringing Charles Dickens to this present era, you see that every great canon artist that we all talk has some future implications, right? It's very surprising to me, even I didn't know this fact, when I heard that it was Shakespeare who actually used the word, what's the Dickens, although it was in a pejorative term, but the term was already there. And we have Dickens later. And now you see, the most surprising is that we are living in a time of COVID, right? So we are quarantined. We were quarantined for over a year. And I will bring one small reference. You see, there's a smallpox epidemic in Bleak House. And Little Dorrit starts out with the characters in quarantine in Marcellus due to the threat of a plague. So the Dickens is already representing what is there. And other than if he has to choose something, right? Like we are still fighting for religion, right? Dickens used to live in an age where you find the development of Darwin, people still believing they were progenies of Adams, people still believing in the psychology of fraud, people still believing in the God's own Jews and rich. So you find that the every differences in the two extremities is somehow brought under the largest canvas of Dickens. So I think that if he comes today, he will pick up the same themes and it will still be relevant.
Okay, Shivas, thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything you had to say regarding Charles Dickens and what kind of elements he would bring in if in this today's era he would be here. Any other participant? Anyone else would like to? Yes, love you, ma'am.
I think when he was alive in the 19th century, there was no welfare system. If you were poor, there was no safety net in the modern sense. Benefits did not exist, but there was always the workhouse. If you were destitute, you would be housed and fed. But it was a grim existence, as Oliver Twist found when he was tangled with Mr. Bumble. Poverty and its evils was a theme in Dickens, which we explored in many of his novels. And there is no doubt that it still exists. Okay, and it preoccupied him all the time. I think if he writes today, if he's still going to write on poverty, orphans. Now, I was reading going through a documentary the other day. So if we were to form a country of unwanted, as ma'am said, unwanted or orphan children, we would have 9 countries. So we have so many people who are still orphans, many children who are unwanted. So I think that is something that is, 159 million children, to be more precise. Likewise, the gap between rich and poor. So there is a lot of differences. The rich, have a lot of it.
Okay, Lavi ma'am, I would like to, sorry to interrupt, but I would like to stop that. We are time bounded and we need to adhere to that.
I think I have.
With that, I would like to just bring on to one important sensitive topic, that is, as Vera ma'am said, that victimization of children was seen. How many over here, all the participants, is there anyone who would like to put forward their views regarding that, if the victimization of the children is yet seen in today's present scenario? Is it prevailing still in today's time?
Yes, ma'am.
So you would like to give your opinions on this?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, you see, there was a time when we were discussing about these first world countries and the third world countries, right? Now we have this fourth world, and the fourth world resides inside the third world itself. When you look at the crisis of Lebanon, the country is collapsing. We look at the cities of Zimbabwe, where you have tons and tons of cash and you cannot buy a bread. And who is there to suffer? The women and children are the most suffering elements of the society, where if you are talking about a society, so we have pretty much more examples. My point was the same that I'm going to repeat. Dickinson's themes would be still true. He doesn't need a new theme to write. Even if he writes in the theme in which he was writing in that setting, it will still be true. So this world didn't move that further, only apart from the scientific temperaments that we have. Dickens didn't, so I'm audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am. So I think that I made my point.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your opinion. Whatever you felt, that is, if Charles Dickens would have been in today's present time, major difference would have not come. No major difference. The only difference would have been that the eras would have been different. Okay, with that saying, anyone else would like to put forth their opinions? Team, it's again a reminder that your active participation, your talking will only benefit you. It's a discussion, so you can all just say. Anyone? Okay, so now, since we are on the topic of Charles Dickens, we are all familiar with, not all, but some of us are very much familiar with what have we all done, what all novels he wrote. And I would like to ask that, which one of yours is your Charles Dickens book, or the favorite one, and why? How could you relate that book in the present time?
Ma'am, it has to be Great Expectation. It has
Well
to be
answered.
Great Expectations. But
Yes.
I mean, you look at the title, it's ironical, like that David Copperfield, even the character is semi-autobiographical, and then we have many other Tale of Two Cities and all. But Great Expectations, right? And this is something that will transcend time and years to come, right? And if the title, when you have, like when he goes and sees Miss Evanson dressed up in this wedding dress and sitting at the chair, and that description, I mean, like every time I read Dickens, right, I find somewhere or along, I find myself there. Like, how am I supposed to be there? How am I supposed to be there? Character Pip is always coming from the head and the psychological understanding of his universe. I mean, it's really admirable. I would say Great Expectations, only due to its characterization, its clear depiction of the expectations that we have in our life and the God's offerings to it. Man proposes and God,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And anyone else? Yes?
We
Would
have Oliver Twist, and then we have our mutual friend. Ma'am, am I
I'm s-
audible?
yes, now you're audible, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, Oliver Twist, our mutual friend, like Oliver Twist, we have we have the cases of child abuse, the orphans who have the traumatic experience. They still are. It is still prevailing in our society. The orphans are still not treated well. They still have to go through the same feelings, the same severities, and the working classes which we have. And then, ma'am, our mutual friend. Which it just talks about basically money and the satirical, it's a satire on the social analysis on the society, so that it is still prevailing and running after money, running behind money, but what it can make of life. it, so that we it's relatable, I feel, in today's
Okay.
era.
Thank you so much. Now, since most of the participants are not participating, yes, Ghazal ma'am, would you like to say something?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I don't remember much about that book because long time back I read that. There's a book, Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. So it was a story about two cities, basically London and Paris. So where there was a girl, Lucy. So she, like after rescuing his father from the prison in Paris, then she brought him back to London, and there she met with two men who look similar. So I exactly do not remember the story much because I read it long back. But yeah, this is one book I wanted to share with, that it was a good book that I read. So now, since we are discussing about Charles Dickens, so I believe again I have to go through this so that I can exactly remember the full story.
Well, Ghazal ma'am, I really hope that you would go through that. And thank you so much. Now, since participants are not participating much, and I will now ask you all, I hope you all can see my screen. Yes, I'll be doing this. And now, you'll, whatever teams come up, you'll have to answer.
That is me again. Would you like me to speak? I would
Okay,
suggest
now
we
since Lavi ma'am
somebody
has given so much
Yeah.
of his input, let's go to another team. Ma'am, the table is quite fond of you, I guess.
Akansha ma'am, you remove the ones who have already answered.
Okay, let's
Yeah.
give it a last try then. Yes, definitely we need to remove now. We will now definitely do.
we have a
Okay,
clear
let's move.
winner here.
I think Sir, then Lavi ma'am, Shushmita ma'am, and me, we four needs to be removed.
Okay, so we come to this part. Okay, now OD 2118. Do we have OD 2113? Okay. Then, okay. I would request Jevin sir. Jevin sir. Okay, I suppose Jevin sir is having a technical glitch. Then we have Now, since this is an open platform, anyone would like to present their screens and their PPTs or anything? Sushmita ma'am, your hand is still raised, so would you like to say something?
Ma'am, I would like to present.
Okay, sure, please.
Okay. Ma'am, is my screen visible?
Yes, ma'am, your screen is visible. Please go ahead.
So, ma'am, my presentation is on Charles Dickens and his works in the Victorian era.
Yes.
I would like to begin with a literary introduction to the Victorian era. It started with the reign of Queen Victoria in 1837. The main writers of this age were Lord Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, Charles Dickens, Thomas Carlyle, John Ruskin, Thomas Babington Macaulay, and Emily Bronte, Charlotte Bronte, and Annie Bronte, the Bronte sisters. There was revolution in scientific works following the writings of Charles Darwin, which was very apparent in the writings of Lord Alfred Tennyson. Writers of this era focused on their own ideas of morality and virtues. The pre-Raphaelites, like Swinburne, focused on the artist's regard for his art. I would like to throw light on the pre-Raphaelites. The pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, later known as the Pre-Raphaelites, was a group of English painters, poets, and art critics formed in 1848, by William Holman Hunt, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Thomas Woolner, and others. Popularly known as Charles Dickens, born Charles John Eupham Dickens, he was one of the most representative authors of the Victorian era. He tried to portray the distinction between the working class and the capitalist class. Realism was one of the most important themes of his novels. He aimed for social reform, making the readers interested in the evils of the day. I would like to talk about some famous works of Charles Dickens, Our Mutual Friend in the year 1865, Great Expectations 1861, David Copperfield 1850, Tale of Two Cities 1859. Before getting published in book format, these all were serialized. Now, some major themes in Dickens's works are social reform is what Dickens aimed through his meticulously constructed plots. For example, in Great Expectations, he portrayed the grim reality of the working class to make it visible to the eyes of the readers and the capitalist class who were ignorant. The plight of the orphan children was represented in works like Oliver Twist. He portrayed the changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution. During this period, the lower classes experienced sordid working and living conditions. And this was, we can also relate this with his own personal experience. When his father was sent to debtor's prison, he was made to work in a boot blacking factory under severe working conditions. Now coming to Little Dorrit, the cruel images of prisons and slums in Little Dorrit. And I would like to tell you that the Marshalsea prisons shown in Little Dorrit, it was influenced by the incident when when Dickens's father was sent to prison when Dickens was a child. His humor and pathos are also considered significant by critics. His humor is broad, humane, and creative. It is apparent in characters like Mr. Pickwick from the Pickwick Papers, Mr. Micawber, or Wilkins Micawber in the novel David Copperfield, Sam Weller, a fictional character in the Pickwick Papers. The names of his characters often personify traits or social positions. The downtrodden Bob Cratchit from his novella A Christmas Carol, The Groveling Uriah Heep from David Copperfield. The cheery Septimus Crisparkle. This character is from his last novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood. These characters mimic the society that existed back then. Now, lastly, I would like to talk about the critical perspective on Dickens. Because at the age of 26, he was a popular author. The demand of his novels was enormous, and this led to often hastened and loosely constructed plots. Although so many critics consider him as a social reformer, he never tried to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor in his works. For example, his characters like Stephen Blackpool never questioned the domination of the working class by the capitalist class and considered that domination as natural. In a way, he promoted the oppression of the oppressed. But beyond all this, his body of works is so striking that it gave rise to its own adjective, Dickensian. His fictions brim with anticipation, brooding settings, plot twists, and mystery. He keeps the reader involved till date. With this, I would like to end my presentation on Charles Dickens. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sushmita ma'am. It was definitely a detailed and covering up major aspects on Charles Dickens. Thank you so much. OD 2132, before I come up to you, I would like Astha Mishra from CIS to kindly come up and present your views regarding Charles Dickens and his works. Ma'am, are you there? Okay. I suppose ma'am would be taking a while. Yes, Srinivas. You may please continue then.
Ma'am, I'm not here to present my views, but I was quite interested in the ma'am's last slide. Thank you, Susmita ma'am, for bringing that. As I have the habit of changing the goalpost every time the topic is told. Ma'am, you know, the more interesting is that even Dickens was not sympathetic towards the Indian cause of 1857 mutiny. In fact, when he was asked in a private letter, he wrote something that I need to quote here. You know faces when they are not brown. You know common experiences when they are not under turbans. Look at the dogs, low, treacherous, murderous, tigerous villains. Those are Dickens' own word. So, I mean, like, I'm not saying that although he championed for the social liberty and justice and cause, but somewhere he missed where the cruelty actually was the center, and it was none other than England itself.
Okay, I guess the participant is facing some kind of technical issue. With that, I would like to come back to the questions which were there with us. Anyone, I'll just repeat the question number one. What has been the most fascinating element in the Dickens writing? Anyone would like to say if they did not get a chance to speak? No one? I guess no one is really a fan of Charles Dickens. Yeah, we all are. And his works are quite relatable. Now with that saying, we have question number two. I'll just repeat again. If Charles Dickens were to write today, what do you think he would have picked up on? Yes, Afroz, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I would like to answer the first question.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
is in Great Expectation. I like the suspense and mystery at the book I read. Thanks.
Yes, Afroz, ma'am, please say.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Please continue.
Okay. Yes. So in the Great Expectation, I read and I like the suspense and mystery, and this which the sir was talking about the wedding scene. Yes, that was very interesting. Actually, it draws a picture, the entire picture in the mind that what is going on. So the narration and the elaboration, the description of the scene was very good. So I like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Afroz ma'am. Well said. Now, Shishmita ma'am.
Ma'am, I would also like to add on that in the beginning, I said that he would write on the hypocrisy of the people. With that, I would also like to mention that he would still write till date because it is relatable, the difference between the working class and the capitalist class, because the difference still occurs in almost everywhere. We do not have to go very far. We can see it in our homes, places around us, and everywhere. So he would also talk about that, the differences between the class, and we face it every day. We get to see it everywhere, every day, almost all the times, and we do not have to go very far. We face it in our homes also, somewhere around the working class and everywhere. So he would
I
write
would like to stop you, Shishmita ma'am. Thank you so much, and all the participants for participating. Very few minutes are left with us, almost I should say seconds. And it was a wonderful session. Thank you for sharing your views, your ideas on Charles Dickens and his works. Definitely, we look forward to meeting again and sharing our views with each other. Any last moment views? Anything before we close up? Anyone? Yes, Ghazal ma'am. You raised your
No,
hand.
I was clapping. This time I was not
So
raising
sorry.
that. I was
Yes,
clapping
yes.
for
Well,
what the participants spoke and for you
I
also.
just want to say the presentation of Shishmita ma'am was very good. Really, very
yes,
good slides.
definitely.
Yes.
I
Thank you,
second
ma'am.
with it. It was wonderful. Thank you so much, Shishmita ma'am,
Thank you
and
so
all the
much, ma'am.
participants for participating.
Thank you, Akansha ma'am. Thank you, Shishmita ma'am.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Akansha, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was so beautiful to take a peek into each of the breakout rooms and the lovely discussions that were going on, the beautiful presentations that were made by the participants. I mean, had Charles Dickens been here, he would have gone gaga over what you had to say in, by way of a tribute to him and his works, and probably would have chosen to write about you. I mean, that answers my second question. He would have picked on you to be able to write about you, for you to be able to understand the Victorian era so beautifully through his works, to be able to critically examine the oddities of this and the crudities of the society in those days, and to be able to highlight the beauty of the author's finesse and dexterity in expressing himself so beautifully in each of the works that you lauded and appreciated. Thank you very much, but now it doesn't end here. We would want, on a common platform, a representative from each of the breakout rooms to sort of come forth with whatever you talked about in your respective rooms, and what is it that you dwelled on in a huge way to be with relevance to the questions that were posed and even beyond. So we'd like to appreciate, or rather we'd like to sort of embrace your views based on the discussions that you've had in each of the breakout rooms. We really would wish to have all of you speak and verbalize your opinions. Unfortunately, the time constraint doesn't allow us to indulge in that kind of an exercise. But for one of you at least, or maybe two of you if time permits, Akanksha, from each of the breakout rooms to be coming forth with your ideas and your views. All yours. Breakout room number 1. So who's going ahead?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm OD 2119. I was there in breakout room number 1, and there we had a very healthy discussion on Charles Dickens, the most fascinating element. And we came up with the idea that he has humor and satire in his almost all the work. And with the help of humor and satire, he has built up the characters also. So characterization is very important element of his writing, in which he has not only made people laugh through comical representation of the characters, right from like description of his characters are very exaggerated and comical, as well as he has also pointed out the names from the noses. And Dickens' characters develop personas that are so precise and absurd to be thoroughly either well loved or well hated by his readers, and comical either way. Like Samuel Pickwick to Oliver Twist, David Copperfield to Ebenezer Scrooge. Even nowadays, we call somebody as Scrooge, and we mean that person is a miser. We want to address that person as a miser, we can call that person Scrooge. And those who will understand the character will understand that, oh, we are talking about a miser person. So the characterization was one of the elements which we have discussed there. Another thing was that how, or if he would be alive now, so what he would have been writing. In this, a common discussion was held in which we pondered upon the child education, which is very important. The children, those who used to work in the poor house, they were meant to only work. But nowadays, if he would have been here, he would have been emphasizing on the child education so that the society should be entirely literate. Nobody will be debarred from getting education. Everybody should be educated. No society for haves or have-nots. The society should be balanced properly, socially and economically. In all the aspects, it should be balanced. Another, we came up with the idea of women empowerment. You can see very well the women nowadays and the women, if you contrast them, the Victorian era, we find that the women nowadays are very empowered. We all are sitting here and discussing. This was not the platform that was there in that time. The people were not, the women were not allowed to come out of their house and have the discussion, even to recreate themselves. But now see, we all are educated and sitting here and sharing our views. So women empowerment can be seen here right in front of us. He must have written on this. And of course, the major point we must have written was the peace in the world. People should uplift their hearts, their mind and soul. They should remove the barriers of racism, which is prevalent in the society. Caste, creed, religion, these all should be shunned away. And people should come up with a more and precise way of living with their own ideologies. And this way, it will make a better place for all of us to live. We know that we are suffering a lot of turmoil in the world nowadays. And we should also think, and Charles Dickens, if he would have been here with us, listening to the discussion, he must have also written on the peace which world demands more. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so very much for those very valuable inputs. And I truly relate to whatever you had to say in toto, in fact, with no differentiation whatsoever. You talked about the importance of characterization in his works, which is undoubtedly has been his forte for all of us literature lovers to celebrate. The fact that he laced all the oddities and all the grievances that he had against the social evils at the time with humor in his works, that is something which is truly appreciable. And it calls for a lot of dexterity in writing to be able to do that through his characters so ably in almost all his works. talking about what he would have picked on today. So you said you're talking about all the idealistic things about no have-nots, about peace in the world. And if allow me to sort of beg pardon of the gentlemen on this forum, you spoke very strongly about women empowerment. I don't know what their take was, and all with tribute to Dickens' humor there. So I'm hoping and praying that the gentleman had no objection and hold no grievance against women empowerment that was talked about so beautifully by the participant. Thank you very, very much. Akanksha, do you think we can accommodate one more speaker from the next room?
Sure, sure. Please.
So thank you, Ms. Raki. And
Thank
I
you,
would
ma'am.
now like to invite a representative from the breakout room number 2.
Room number 2, Dr. Manju Anand here. So,
Oh,
ma'am, we did not want to come out of breakout room actually. The scene was going on so well, like Charles Dickens was sitting.
Sorry to have pulled you out, Manju ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, the first thing I would like to say that is such a lovely session that my takeaway that I'm going to reread the Charles Dickens and the Victorian novels at all. Now, ma'am, we had discussed, we have Aninda ma'am and Sinha ma'am and Uzma ma'am with a very good as a host. And then we have one more, Payal ma'am and me, we were there. And we had discussed about the marginalized society. We had discussed about haves and have-nots and social class conflict, exploitation, child abuse, hypocrisy, poverty, empathy, sympathy, the empathetic character like Nell Trent. We have all the lawlessness, lawfulness, inequalities, helplessness, economic, disparities, and the social evils, moral degradation, everything. And we came down to such, different characters. Like we talked about Astor, we talked about Lady Deadlock, the kind of secret she had kept in her, and finally when it came out, and then she became such a cruel lady. And then we have this Mr. Wickfield, David Copperfield, Clara Pagatti, the extramarital affairs also we talked about. We talked about Fagham the thief, we talked about Brownlow, we talked about Oliver Twist and the monks and all the things, whatever he had given us. But the final thing is that he had given something to ponder about, that what we should do and we should not do. We should always feel that there is always one heart, one soul, and it always tells you that what is the right path, like we have seen in Dickens novels also. So the kind of emotions which he had dealt with all the characters, different kinds of characters, all kind of psychology, which we feel that today also we are getting everywhere. We have Nell Trent everywhere, so we have Lady Deadlock also everywhere. So we try to compare it. And then after that, we discussed about that he would have, like Aninda ma'am said, that science fiction he would have written about, because writers always think of future. So then Payal ma'am said that because of the transition period, there are so many changes are there. Like today also, the young generation, when they go to metropolitan city, so they embrace such evil things. So that also we discussed about. So Charles Dickens would have written about all these things. Then Payal ma'am also said that he would have written about the dominant role of money, about child exploitation, about poverty and all. And I said that he would have been a very, very big blogger or YouTuber, or he would have given a lot of series, because he was the first person who gave us the series, the novels in series. So we would have watched him on TV with all the soap operas or somewhere or the other, and we would love to see. He would have talked about the LGBTQ, he would have talked about during the lockdown period, the domestic violence, he would have talked about the women empowerment, he would have talked about that all men should now work the way they face difficulties during the lockdown. So in some humorous way, he would have talked about the advertisement should also be given to all men, that all the women who are working should be done by men. Something that, in a very humorous, he would have been one more Kapil Sharma. I suppose that Charles Dickens show would have been very, very popular. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Oh, that was wonderful. Manju ma'am, you said that you had a lot to talk about his characterization, his works. You went into the nitty-gritties of each of his characters in course of your discussion, the many that you could accommodate. But the most important takeaway from me, in particular, from what you have shared on this platform, is that you talked about how important it is to understand from Dickens' works and writings that a sense of righteousness, moral and ethical conduct holds a lot of importance. So that was beautiful. Talking about what he would have picked on, I love the way you sort of almost shouted aloud from the rooftop saying you would have been a blogger. God help Charles Dickens. Now that is making your imagination run wild, and why not? So he would have probably been on TV and in his own style, laced with humor, as I believe in strongly. Again, no offense meant for the men folk on this platform. He would have wanted all the men to work despite the lockdown and the COVID oddities. Beautifully highlighted there, imagination wild at its wildest best. Beautiful thoughts. Thank you very, very much. Akanksha, I need your permission again, and more so from the convener. Can we accommodate one more speaker, ma'am, from the third room? Yes?
Sure, ma'am.
So why should anybody be left behind in the celebration of Dickens and Dickensian?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yes.
This is from Breakout Room 3, and my name is Vidya from 0D2138. Thank you all for the wonderful opportunity. So we were talking about how the works of the greatest novelist of the Victorian era enjoyed unprecedented popularity during his lifetime, and how his works are widely read even today because of the contemporary nature of all the social evils that he portrayed during his in his writings. So we discussed in length about the way he used satire and caricature to portray all the social evils, and how humor being the main thread in the web of all Victorian novels. We talked about the way he depicted characterization, a vivid type of characterization. He had flat characters, round characters. We talked about Miss Havisham, Ebenezer Scrooge. So we talked about a wide range of characters there. We also concentrated on a style of writing as English teachers, how his writing was so very interesting, and how his style of narration was very brisk, how his language had a vigor, and how it was both genial and humorous and satirical, everything put together. And mainly how Dickensian novels had all the elements that you would probably expect. It had melodrama, romance, sentiment, action, thrill, everything was there. So we discussed about all these things, and we also talked about the character, about how the roguish hero kind of characters he had, which ultimately he idealized. So like in Pickwick Papers and all that stuff. So we spoke about all that, and it was definitely a very enlightening moment for us. We didn't want to leave the breakout room like the other ma'am said. We were running short of time, but somehow we managed to convey all our views with whatever was given to us. And the second question about what would he have picked on had he lived today in 2021? Well, that opened a Pandora's box, because some of them spoke about global warming and then cybercrime. And a few of us spoke about how he would have written about corruption, because writing about corruption is his cup of tea. And today, the magnitude with which corruption has grown, it's much more than what happened in the Victorian era. Then some of them spoke about how he would have written about child education and poverty, and also peace and scientific crimes that result because of scientific and technology advancement. So we got an opportunity to speak about a lot of things. And I'm sure that even if we had an hour more, we would have definitely continued. Thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity.
Fantastic. Breakout Room 3, you talked about how his works entailed satire on victimization of children and women. That is what his works were all about. And not to forget the core of humor, which sort of wrapped every character around and brought a smile to the face of the readers, or when it called for performance on stage, brought a smile to all the viewers. The style of writing, which was poetic indeed, laced with figures of speech, beautiful analogies and comparisons, and the fact that his writings were holistic in nature, comprising various emotions, human emotions. So melodramatic, humorous, and the works. Talking about what you would have picked on today, you talked about all the pertinent issues that deserve to be addressed in today's times. And yes, he would have chosen to write on maybe global warming, corruption, cybercrime, education of each and every child, peace in the world, and about ruling out poverty from today's times. Gosh, what have you gone and done, all of you? You've created magic around you. You've brought Dickens to life, and that was our sole intended, deliberate purpose. To bring Dickens to life, which you have all done so ably this afternoon, and to bring out the Dickens in you. And I won't say what the Dickens to that. So beautiful, hats off, kudos to each one of you. Each one of you is a literary figure in your own right, brought out the best in you, brought out the Dickens in you. And yes, there couldn't have been a better tribute under the canopy of 9th Odyssey International to our very own, our loved, revered literary hero, Charles Dickens. Thank you very much. Adios. Goodbye. A huge God bless. And like I always say, for those of you who know me, and for those of you who will never forget me, and you better not, keep smiling. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vera ma'am, for your precious time and today's insightful and delightful open mic session. There are many takeaways from today's session, and I really hope all the participants have benefited from Vera ma'am's speech. Thank you so much, ma'am, once again. With this, we come to the end of our open mic session. Thank you all for joining. Before you all leave, participants, there is a link for the exit ticket. We look forward to your valuable inputs. Thank you so much. Have a great day. The link is in the chat box for the exit ticket. Thank you.